Hello and welcome to the Haki podcast. And today is going to be a deep conversation with a man whose name resounds and resonates with many in the civil society space, especially those in the health sector. Someone who I have known personally, someone who has done incredibly well in the health space, has published different papers, has made several contributions, has challenged governments in the courts of law to advance health at a larger scale. He has spoken at global events advocating for health law and policy. He has been in the classroom, in the academia, and contributed quite strongly. Someone who has fathered resilient and very, very big civil society organizations in Africa. Dr. Moses Mulumba, it's such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much, Solomon, and I'm happy to be part of the Haki episode of the podcast today.
Yeah. Dr. Mulumba, we walk back so many years ago, but over the last so many years, I've seen you make a very strong contribution to resilient civil society organizations. You birthed the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development and did absolutely well with challenging government on different fronts on health and access to health care in courts of law that has never been thought before. You have grown that organization from just 1 or 2 staff to over 200 staff. You then moved on and started Afya and Haki, which is now promoting Afrocentrism, the Afrocentric ideology in advancing health and justice in Africa. Let me just take you back. This man Mulumba, Moses Mulumba, who many here, and some of them don't know, I have been in spaces and I've talked about the name Moses Mulumba, and everyone, yeah, we hear that name. Others have got so close to you that they say you have moved them significantly in their different civil society organizations. But Moses, let me start from where it all began. Who is Moses Mulumba? Let's start there.
Thank you so much, Solomon. That's always a very difficult question to talk about who you actually are. I think in many cases we are described by people.
Yeah.
And many people base the descriptions on what they see of us. Personally, I think I'm a humble servant of community. That's how I would look at myself. Over the years, I have received different definitions from different people. There are those that see me as, a lawyer. There are those that look at me as a mentor. Then there are those that look at me as a civil society leader, which is the subject that we are talking about today. But I've been made of different building blocks as an individual. So I have been brought up by a single mom who is a retired nurse now. Growing up in that home of a nurse that was working in a non-profit Muslim facility, but also running her own private clinic, including treating people at home, because people would come home for treatment very early in the morning before she goes for work.
Wow.
Women with babies, pregnant mothers, people with cats.
At home?
At home.
And you were there to help?
Yes. I have escorted people to hospital when she has made referrals. I have been a boy that goes to shop for my mom's clinic at a very young age, understanding where wholesale pharmacies are in town. Leave the Kampala, today, but the Kampala of the 80s and early 90s, navigating through the Land Rover from Chibuli when the road is not as tarmacked as it is today, and going down to town to buy medicine. worth 20,000, and it's a full bag of medicine, and bringing this medicine to my mom for prescription. But I've also stayed in a health facility. I've stayed in Jubilee Hospital. That was where our first home was. So staying, and the staff quarters were near a kitchen, the hospital kitchen. People used to come and cook food for their patients. So it was like shared kitchen. But also very close to a mortuary somehow. So you have opportunity to see people that have delivered and they're happy going home with a band of joy. But you also have opportunity to look at people that have come to receive a service and the news has ended up bad, the point of losing their loved ones. And all those experiences that I saw, I think in one way or another, have shaped who I am today.
So basically, you grew up in this health environment, both home and also in hospital. You would sometimes go. I share a similar experience with you. I grew up with my grandmother, so she was a nurse, and I as well, she used to take me to work, so I would see her injecting people. I sort of also grew up in a hospital environment, so it's fascinating your story, how it also relates with mine in a way. But Moses, so that in a way shaped your being as you were growing up, didn't it?
In one way or another, I think yes, because I don't remember what my personal goals were. People grow up saying they want to be pilots, they want to be this, or they want to be that. I don't remember forming opinions on who I want to be. I think I've been around mostly people, and eventually when I had opportunity to do a course on law, it was clear that I wanted to practice law that serves the people that I've interacted with for a long time. And being in law school and being subjected to all these course units, I think along the way I met health law and policy, and it was natural. It related to many things. It was talking about justice in health systems. It was talking about regulating private healthcare professionals, looking at the rights of the health workers themselves. I was coming from a home where I could, even as a young man, I could say, oh, my mom works overnight and we can't afford a certain school because, this is what she earns. It was natural, Solomon. It was natural that when I attended the class of health law and policy, I knew that this would be one of the things that I would consider. But life is interesting because there is what you desire and what you want, and then there is what they call opportunity. And opportunity usually shapes us. And we go with a wave of opportunity. Every single one of us has a moment of opportunity. We never know what that moment is. In my own perspective, I think opportunity met with passion. The opportunity to be able to do work on health and policy met with the passion that I had. It met with the life that had been exposed to for a long time. So along the way, as I'm studying, I begin to meet professors, and then I meet Professor Kasimba Emmanuel, who introduced me to environmental and policy. And within environment, there's a whole course, a whole unit, the topic that was covering right to a clean and healthy environment. And some of the cases we're looking at are cases where Rubaga Girls' School is sued for a smelly latrine, and the neighbor is saying, no, this is violating my, right to a clean environment, and the judges give a positive judgment in that. At a time when they were, legislating for tobacco control, stopping public smoking. These are things I had grown up seeing, even before I went into the practice. So as a research assistant for over 4 years, I picked a lot of interest in this, and I think the judges began to make very progressive judgments. The first cases I came across as a student were cases on public interest that had been brought under public interest litigation, and they were environment. Many of them were to do with the right to a clean and healthy environment. And then before I knew it, I attended a workshop, one of the workshops. I was a privileged research assistant. So I ended up attending one of the workshops because of that capacity. And one of the lawyers in town had been given a case of Nakacha who had died trying to deliver. She had delivered, but then, she was mistreated, and the border guys, went for her, subjected her to a full examination, thinking that she had stolen a baby. Eventually, her baby was taken away to San Baby's home, and then she came to claim the baby. They said the baby had died, and the case ended up demonstrating too many things that demonstrated injustices at the local government level, at the police level, but also within our health facility. If a lady has come to deliver and you can't deliver at Naguru, how do you send her to Mulago to walk on foot without a referral letter? Those are things that intrigued me eventually. So I found myself picking up on some of these subjects and picking a lot of interest in.
And that fused with the law that you had studied at law school. Finally, you graduate out of law school. You went and did your practice at LDC, and then you were a fully fledged lawyer. Like, for many lawyers, the practice would be you go into legal practice, open up a law firm, go into financial litigation, go into accounts and all these things. Corporates, many of them are corporate secretaries,
Corporation secretaries.
Yeah, corporation secretaries. But yours, you took a different direction to actually implement what you studied in the health law and policy classroom. Talk to us why you went into that direction, and what did you do after campus, after law school?
It was interesting because after doing law school and LDC, I continued doing work with Professor Emmanuel Kasimbazi. And then along the way, he got a scholarship to go outside. And when he went for his Fulbright scholarship, he went with the entire family. And things kept ringing in my bell, what was my next destiny and what would be happening. But I remember the law firm in Kamocha, Kanjocha Street, where we were, there was a group of young men that had formed a company. And this company was to supply ACs. They were all having full-time jobs, but every evening they would meet to discuss their business idea. Eventually, this company grew very big. So it rang, a bell in my head that even when I was, as I was, it was possible that something could be done. It was one of the motivations. So I called two colleagues, David Kamanda and then Nasuna Viola. And I say, you guys are in private law firms. Can we do a law firm? In my mind, thinking about a law firm that would relate to work that I'd seen, environmental law,
health law,
and practice. When they came, they said, okay, we like the idea, but we are not sure that those things work in Uganda. I think people are chasing land, people are registering companies. If the idea is to have a law firm that's going to do that, we will do it. Let's put efforts together. So I said, okay, I also hear you, but let's do the normal law firm, but also allow me to do a public interest wing in the law firm. And I would ask that I commit all my time on the public interest wing.
You guys can go and do
we can use the same door to enter, but let's specialize. You can do the other areas of the law. So I managed to convince them, and we put resources together, paid rent for the first 6 months, and the fully fledged law firm opened. At inspection, I remember when the inspectors came, they said, oh, this is one of the most organized law firms that we've seen. We hope that we'll find you next year when you are as organized as this, because many young lawyers prepare law firms as smart as this, but the next year you don't find them.
Yeah.
And I was really, really committed and thought that it was the best idea that would happen. So we start. And after 6 months, the rent was running out. There was no business to sustain. So I don't remember.
It can be tough when you start.
It can be very, very tough.
Yeah.
I don't remember Viola coming in a meeting to say goodbye. I only realized after she had left that she had not reported for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I also don't remember David saying goodbye. He also just disappeared and went back to the law firm where he was working. But then I called him, and I remember we were in Nakawa, near the car bond. I had bought my first car out of the research and consultancies I'd done. So I had made a decision to sell off the car. It was a newer, sell it off and buy a little car. And use the money that I had sold off to continue. And I told him, I was in Nakawa, I remember very well. I told him I'm selling this car here to get a smaller car and get the proceeds to pay the rent. Once the rent is there, I am going to sublet that place for sustainability. The landlord is not in Uganda, after all. I will sublet it and I will see how work moves. But I am not the type that brought people here to show them an office. And now I will have no place to bring them. What if they ask me, where did the office go? So I don't remember him saying yes or no, but I straight away did that, go to brokers in Kamocha. We subletted the office into 4 sub-offices. And then I decided to continue work on health run policy only. Then I think after like a month, he came back. He found the office was operational. He said, no, I think this is promising. I should be able to do things again. I told him, yes, I am not turning back to the law firm. Take lead of the law firm. I will take lead of the non-profit. Let's share the office. Because at that time, I only had 1 office left. So I told him, put your desk there. There is common space that we can share. And that's how the story of Center for Health, Human Rights and Development started. I think the rest has been history.
Yeah, I just wanted to stop right there before you get into the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development. It can be lonely when you're starting out. It really can be lonely. From your story, I hear that even those that had come on board at one point left you. And as a vision bearer, you had to carry your vision alone and walk through that delicate, lonely phase to keep the dream alive. What message do you give to startups, to people who have those visions, but sometimes friends walk away, partners walk away, and you just remain with that vision yourself? From your story, you had to even sacrifice your own car to keep the office open, but you kept in there with your dream. Moses.
So someone, it was not just the car. I carried cups from home brought them to the office to be able to have people take a cup of tea. I carried the percolator. I carried everything. I think the most important thing is
you got things from home.
Yes, is the vision.
Yeah,
and the belief in yourself that this vision that I see is something that is very possible to happen. There are going to be frustrations. The breakthrough is not going to come simple, but I know, and I've not found out a person who has insisted on an idea for 10 years, and they have not been able to put it somewhere.
Wow.
The challenge that we usually have is that so many voices come along once we have these visions, and 70 or 80% of those voices are on the impossibilities. And I have learned over time with the story of CEHURD that impossibility should never be a word that you pronounce. I usually tell people, I'm starting this, I'm not here to try out. I'm here to make it work. If the spirit is that I am not here to try out, I want this thing to work. The landscape was not easy for CEHURD. We entered a landscape where people had been in NGOs for years, 10, 20 years, they had been existing. How do you make a case and say, this is my value add in the market? As I will be saying later on, NGOs are like business entities. If you don't run them with a sense of business, you'll never sustain it. You'll never grow it. You have to run it as a business. A business faces competition. Business attracts the best. Business attracts accountability, but also business attracts and requires that you're committed to it. So for me, the most important thing is vision and believing in yourself. It is very true too that you need to consult, you need to hear people, but no one knows your idea more than you do know it. And I think when it comes to NGOs, it is even much more important because we are looked at as secondary options. There are very few people that have considered NGO practice as a professional practice. Even lawyers, when you ask them, they are very shy to indicate that they are working for NGOs. Because traditionally, a lawyer is a transactional lawyer. A lawyer is a banking lawyer, is a big insurance lawyer negotiating millions of shillings, but not a lawyer that's going to be working for a non-profit. Even the names that we use, non-profit, mission-driven, all the time. These are colonial legacies that we've carried on. But I think NGOs have moved away from that. So building an NGO, creating your own market value, and also understanding how you're going to build systems and make things work is very important. In many cases, when we have built NGOs, even when we've done the best, we've made them family enterprises. We've not built them as sound business enterprises. It's very okay to construct a business as a family business, but on sound principle. Whether it's your son or daughter that is coming to work, they should have qualifications.
Moses, I feel like we're losing, you're saying so much and we're losing to really take a deep dive in that. And you mentioned that running civil society organizations and NGOs should be done like a business. Yeah. You talked about issues of accountability, you talked about systems, you talked about attracting the best talent and competing for those best talent. You talked about being able to retain that talent. It's business. It's that's different. That's unique. That actually you go to the market and attract the best talent. I wanted you to emphasize that. That's very important. And the fact that it's not family business, it's not yours, but it's just you. Yes.
So
I don't want us to lose that.
Yeah. So Solomon, when I am in an NGO, I have departments. I have a communications department, I have a finance department, I have a programs department. But the finance department is looking for a finance person, for instance.
Yeah.
Nile Brewery is looking for a finance person. DSTV is looking for a finance person. An oil company is looking for a finance person. If I put out an advert that I'm looking for a finance manager, the same qualifications that Nile Breweries wants, or DSTV or whatever, are the same qualifications that I need. So I'm in a market competing for the best talent. I can choose to pick on anyone to come and do work for me in the finance department as a manager. And many NGOs have done it. But you're not going to...
Most of which are family members.
Family members. You're not going to be able to actually attract talent and be able to be accountable and be able to have sound systems. Because if you think that an NGO needs to get the secondary in terms of talent, then you're losing it. And I think for you to be able to understand this and why we have reached where we are, we need to get back a little bit to NGOs and their history. I have interested myself in understanding this sector, which I've been in for close to 15 years. This sector was carved out of the history of missionaries. When colonialists came in, they came with a cover. One cover was brutal and it needed to rule and take over. But then there's one that would come
with a
cross and smoothen the hearts. So they would give health facilities, they would give education services,
churches.
They would give churches, they would extend social services. It's the same person that has come. On one hand, they are taking the land. On the other hand, they are giving the smooth way of doing it. Now, the smooth one was the NGO. And the way we coiled it was that this is a mission. We are missionaries. We are not profit driven. We are coming to serve society. And that has been the norm. Look at the constitutions of NGOs. The first requirement to be registered is that you must declare that you're not just non-profit, but you're also living, and your life must be seen as a non-profit. Just like church. You're not just a priest, but you must be seen that you're not pompous as a priest, because the expectation of society is that you must be that.
That is true.
Now, NGOs are not that anymore. NGOs are big actors in the sector. They are players on the table to hold the governments accountable. It's not just about service delivery anymore. It's about governance. It's about accountability. It's about the big World Bank projects and understanding the social dimensions of this. The non-state actor and the non-state institutions that come in to hold the government accountable, they must be technical. So what we saw was that during colonialism, we NGOs were used for a long time, and they completely took away the African movements that had been built. The African NGOs that we used to have, some of the examples, Maji Maji. These were the NGOs that we had, that were fighting for the rights of the Africans. You go to South Africa, look at the NGOs that were fighting apartheid. You go to Zimbabwe. These were the kind of African NGOs that we were actually having. They are not structured per se. They were movements for a long time. But these were destroyed. And in the alternative, the missionary type were introduced. And these missionary organizations have been run on missionary principles for a long time. But missionary principles cannot apply in free market economies that we actually are in these days.
Yeah.
And this is something that we need to think and change in the African NGOs. Because think about Oxfam, think about World Vision, think about all the international organizations that work with us. They are international. They pay people on international rates. They do accounting systems, sophisticated accounting systems.
They are audited by global firms.
KPIG. If you cannot actually hire a big firm to come and audit you, then you're losing it. And we are not going to be able to compete with some of these international NGOs. So Solomon, the point I'm making is that we should stop looking at NGOs as simple entities where we run to when life has become unbearable, to confuse communities, and pretend that we are serving communities. But we should be community actors who are accountable, that come with resources. And I like the way NGOs are now changing. They are having business arms. Look at Vision for Africa. How many schools does it have? Everywhere. People are paying fees and it's sustaining itself. Look at Amre for Africa. They are running a whole air ambulance business and they're sustaining themselves. I think NGOs need to move into that direction. But the current challenge we have is that the governance structures we put the missionary structures of lack of ownership, opaque ownership of NGOs. There are no owners that you can describe. You say, no, it's a membership organization and the members are people who are not bothered except to wait for per diem to come and vote on the annual general meetings. And that's not the kind of governance that we need. We need people that are going to hold us accountable. So for me, in building CEHURD, in working with a Haki, I have understood that unless I understand business models of doing work, we're not going to be able to build these entities the way we've built them. And I have gone to NBS to look at how they market, how they do their branding. I have gone to Movit to understand how it does its business, how things move. I have been to all these entities to pick a lesson and a leaf and bring it back. And to tell you what, Solomon, I've not been disappointed. I have not looked for board members and worked with board members who are going to just, come and rubber stamp what we've presented. Not at all. We have looked for credible board members based on their experience technically, but also experience as seasoned people in the sectors that we are serving. So that's the African NGO that we want to see. We don't want African NGOs that are still built on missionary standards, that are still built. We can have the same objectives, but how do we achieve those objectives? How do we make sure that we build these NGOs in a very sustainable way? So for me, the entire story and path of building CEHURD has been that. I'll tell you, the first stages of building an organization are very difficult. We start with friends, we start with family, we start with the resources. Even your board members, to convince them to be board members, must be people who know you.
Yeah.
That's where we start. We don't have systems. Think about the first audit report that you have when you have received less than $1,000 in a year of beginning. You just have to find a way in which you do it. You can't hire an auditor. But how do you move from that stage to a stage that makes you realize that I am now growing I'm receiving money, and the money that is coming in is not for eating. It's money that's supposed to be taking forward these objectives that we actually set. In many cases, that's the second stage where NGOs begin struggle. People in one or another realize your name, you've done one activity that makes you famous, and everyone picks interest in you. But once they come to look into your internal organization, you are almost not there. You are non-existent. But on the other hand, as NGO leaders, we are calling for accountability from government. We are calling for transparency.
But we don't want
participatory. We are not doing it. and this is the challenge that we've faced for a long time, So I think
we don't want anyone to talk about it.
We don't want people to question us. You saw the NGO exhibition that we had in Uganda, and what triggered it. It's, doing exhibition in every other sectors. And then when the threat comes that we are going to an NGO threat, an NGO exhibition, everyone fights from the NGO, and they do it. And look at just how much information, came out. Okay, of course, some of these are allegations, but they point to something that we need to think about. I think NGOs must be democratic themselves, they must be transparent themselves, but they must operate on sound business principles of accountability and making sure that systems are in place. If these systems are not in place, you're not having an organization. You're having something that you understand yourself, but not an organization.
We take a small break. When we return, we'll talk about systems and building resilient civil society organizations. I'm still with Dr. Moses Mulumba, renowned doctor and the executive director of Afya and Haki, and also the founder of the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.